start out by saying, thank you for helping me. And all of a sudden, that service provider knows that this customer is an easy customer to serve for. So I think if Singaporeans want to experience better service, be a better customer.
Welcome to YanaTV. Today our guest is Ron Kaufman, who has been ranked world's #1 customer experience guru consistently for 6 years. Ron is also New York Times bestselling author for his book Uplifting Service, where he helps people how to delight the customers, energize the team, and transform your organization. Ron, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Let's begin from the very, very beginning. I know we're in Singapore right now and we're in Asia. However, where have you been born?
I was born in Connecticut in the United States, near Massachusetts and New York on the East Coast. Went to university nearby at Brown University. And during my university years, spent time in Europe, studying, traveling, doing other things. And that really very quickly opened me up to the world.
I can imagine. I actually used to live in Connecticut, before I moved to Singapore. So I know the town. Right. When did you come to Asia?
I traveled through Asia in the late 1980s, but I moved to Singapore in July of 1990. I came here for a week. They asked me to stay another week. Then could you stay for a month? Then could you run the project for 7 months? And it's been now 33 years.
And you're a Singaporean, probably.
I've now also become
right?
a Singapore citizen. That's
yes.
right. That's right.
So what's probably, you could say, the biggest lesson that you have experienced in those 33 years living in Singapore?
Well, it's interesting. The lessons of 33 years is one thing, and then the lessons of living in Singapore.
Oh.
So what made Singapore so appealing for me was the incredible diversity and the necessity of living together in harmony. Singapore has multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and we know we have to get along. So then there's a very high level of respect and mutual appreciation for one another that works. And I found that tremendously appealing.
And was that one of the main reasons why you stayed?
That and the food.
Right.
No, Singapore is a very small place and it's surrounded by a very big neighborhood. And it's the kind of location that has to perform better in order to survive, but especially if it wants to thrive. It doesn't have agriculture. It doesn't have an oil reserve. It doesn't have a large hinterland. It's one little city. And so how do you perform well and become what the world knows Singapore to be today? You've got to constantly be focusing on how can you be more valuable, not only to yourselves, but to other people in the world. And as you know, my definition of service is taking action to create value. So it's a very good match to come here as an educator with an entire population that wanted to learn and apply to actually perform better.
As world's #1 customer experience guru and a person who knows so much about customer service and service in general.
Yes.
What is your experience of Singapore when it comes to service?
Singapore service?
Yes.
Yeah. So Singapore, the culture of Singapore is multi-ethnic and it's majority Chinese. And the history of that culture traditionally has been one of trading. So there's a very strong ethic of, being productive, getting things done, having it work. The gentleness, the politeness, the kind patience, not so much native in the culture. But the other thing I noticed that most people tend to leave out when they're critiquing Singapore service.
That's why I'm asking.
Customer service has two parts. There's the service provider, and that's the person who should take action to create value. But the other half is the customer. And the customer can also take action to make things easier, smoother, better for the service provider. And Singaporeans as customers are also not natively, always the most polite or patient or encouraging. And so one of the ways that my wife and I get tremendous service in Singapore is we're good customers. We literally start out by saying, thank you for helping me. I really appreciate it. What's your name? And then just take that one moment to connect. And all of a sudden, that service provider knows that this customer is an easy customer to serve. This customer is one to take that extra step for. So I think if Singaporeans want to experience better service, be a better customer.
I love that. We announced on our program among our community earlier that you will be coming as a guest. And so some of the questions that came actually from local people who feel that they really want to be world-class in everything that they do. They told me, Yana, when Ron comes on the show, please make sure you ask him, how can we do better?
We being?
We being people who are providing service in Singapore.
You have to understand that service is taking action to create value for someone else. The action is only purposeful if it creates value. But value is only received by the person that you serve. So actually, the definition begins with the someone else that you're serving. Are you curious about them? Are you aware of what they're really concerned about? Can you understand their aspirations, their ambitions, what they want to achieve, what they're anxious about, what they want to avoid? Like, how much are you locating yourself as the service provider in the world of the person that you're serving and being genuinely, authentically concerned and interested in that? Then you would be able to understand what that person would value. And then you can figure out what action to take. And the challenge is too many people come to work and say, I'm here to do my job. Right? And then if you're just procedurally here to follow the script and do your job, the majority of the time, you may not match with what it is that the customer would actually appreciate.
Do you think it is up to each individual, or we have some expectations, bosses to step in, company owners? So if we talk about especially F&B industry, that's has been a lot of conversation. So anything around food, restaurants.
When people hear the word service, very quickly they think of a waiter in a restaurant.
Exactly, actually.
Okay. There is a category of creating value in service, which has to do with the attitude that you show, the smile, the friendliness, the patience, the flexibility. All of that, we could call that service mindset. And that's a very, very important area, especially in B2C. But it's not the only category of value. Remember, service is taking action to create value. So what are the other categories? Well, for example, if we use a restaurant, is the food really good? Is very different than how was the service attitude, okay? And so whose job is it to make sure that the product is actually very good? Well, you need the chef, you need the people who are actually purchasing the food, you need all of the equipment to be able to do the cooking and the refrigeration. So what's the role of the leader in that? Making sure that the people have everything they need to have a great product. Well, that's another. Then you get the category called the delivery system. So is this a self-service buffet? Or do I walk up to the counter and place my order? Or do I sit down and you bring me a menu? Or do I use my app and you deliver the food to my door? Same food. Same opportunity, different opportunity to show good attitude, but the delivery system's completely different. So when you say good service, it's not just the attitude. It's the quality of the product. It's the flexibility and convenience and ease of the delivery system. It's the friendliness and the attitude. And then there's one more category. Ongoing relationship. Do you recognize me? Do you remember me? Do you thank me for coming back? Do you appreciate what it is that you get my point?
Yeah, people love that.
Right. So now when we talk about services taking action to create value, it's not just the waiter in the restaurant. It's the whole restaurant. So then what's the leader's role in that? Is having every single person involved in this case, having a restaurant, and having it run successfully, recognize that their job is to take action that will create value for somebody else, and the somebody else may be their colleague. It may not be the end customer. The leader has to take the lead.
I'm just wondering, let's say for a leader, whether it would be an owner of a smaller business, medium business, large business, who right now listening to our conversation, what do you think a leader needs to do or change perhaps in the mindset or change in the way how they take actions to turn this wheel? That the company actually goes in the direction of service culture.
Yeah, there are basically 7 rules of service leadership, fundamental behaviors. So for example, you've got to talk the talk and of course walk the talk. And there are others, but the one that a lot of people who are leaders don't recognize, it's called measure what really matters. And right away you go, well, what really matters is top line revenue or bottom line profit or safety or retention of staff or something like that. Those are all legitimate measures, but they're all lagging indicators. They come long after the service that was provided. In other words, you provide all this service and then how did it work out? What leaders should understand is that there are also leading indicators of creating an experience that will give you the lagging results that you need. So what are those leading indicators? And when we teach service performance improvement or strengthening of a service culture, then what you want and you need is your people to generate new ideas. And then not every idea is a good idea. So once they've generated new ideas, what if we tried this? Why don't we do that? You get enough new ideas, then your team can evaluate the ideas. Some ideas are obviously not good ideas. Other ideas need to be improved. Let's think about it. We can do this quickly. This one won't even cost anything. We can do this one ourselves. Those are called quick wins. Go do them. See what happens. And then there will be other new ideas that might need other people to help, might need more time, might need a budget. So those ideas need to be percolated up, and leaders need to be asking for this, listening to this, encouraging this, providing support to this. You can't expect frontline people to do that on their own without the leaders measuring what really matters, which is the leading indicators that ultimately produce the improvements that do work, that give you the lagging indicators, where so many leaders are spending their time right away talking about, you get my point.
So when I hear people, quite a few actually, that's why we're having this conversation, saying that they would love to see service to be improved, in Singapore. Yes. So we should not actually blame people who are necessary in the front line dealing with the customer entirely. So it's not only the server or a woman at the counter or a man, right? So it's actually a lot about leadership. And so the conversation we're having here, it starts from the top. And that's where people need to realize how important it is to have the service mindset.
I think it starts from the top and it starts from the customer. So you can't just go to the frontline service provider and expect to get great service. The wear and tear of being a frontline service provider, of encountering customers, some of them who are not in a very good mood, is persistent all day long. Now here you come as the customer. What kind of a customer are you?
I'd really encourage everyone now to reflect in the moment. Ooh. I'm doing it. Especially you said Singapore with so many cultures. Do you see difference when it comes to service and maybe dealing with people of different cultures? And maybe some people are more, adjust and more equipped to do it more naturally, and others might be struggling a little.
And this is a good place to struggle because there's so much learning going on here by so many people all the time that somebody who's not getting it or somebody who needs to make a few mistakes before they figure it out, this is a place where people want to do better. And nobody's perfect all the time. I mean, the other day, this is a true confession, right?
Please.
I'm in an ice cream parlor and they serve scoops, okay? And you can get 2 scoops for $10, but there were 3 flavors I wanted to try, and I said, I don't want more ice cream, but I just want to try the 3. No, we can't do that. And I'm looking at the lady like, here's my $10. I mean, give me less than 2 full scoops. I just want to try no, we can't do that, right? So please, how old are you? 20. You're a 20-year-old person. You can't make the decision to let me, no, I can give you a taste of the 3rd one, on one of those little tiny spoons, but you can't have 3 different flavors in that cup, right? And so I literally said, could you please go ask your manager? And the poor girl, she goes in the back, she comes back out, manager says, no, you can't do that. And I was not playful.
I can imagine.
I was not polite, and I was like, oh my goodness. And you know what? I went back, I had to eat humble pie. I called the place afterwards and I said, I need to speak to the manager. I said, I'm that guy who just, I'm apologizing to you. I need to apologize. People make mistakes. That's how we learn.
How did you get into the service industry? That's probably the most important question that I haven't asked yet.
I got so lucky. My father's mother taught kindergarten for 40 years. So I was one of her grandkids, and I used to be able to go to the kindergarten sometimes as grandma's, teacher's pet and watch. And as a very young kid, I remember there was a day 2 kids were fighting. And she's the kindergarten teacher. So she went over and she separated them, but then very quickly she got both of them in a good mood and got them back to playing together again. And I remember when their parents came to pick them up, she told both sets of parents that these were the most fantastic kids. They'd been wonderful all day long. They were just gems in the classroom. And I watched this and I realized very young that what she was doing was taking action to make sure that everybody was feeling valued, I was 5.
And?
Okay. I called that service. She called it love.
Yes.
And then I went into Frisbee. Frisbee? I'm in the Ultimate Frisbee Hall of Fame. Okay? In other words, I took the sport out to the world. And the first rule of the game is called the spirit of the game. And the spirit of the game says that the people on the field are responsible for the spirit and the quality of play. Rule number 1.
I love that.
Okay? That's before how many people on the field, how do you score a point, the spirit of the game. So then when I came to Singapore and they said they wanted to create a service training center to uplift the quality of service in the whole nation, so okay, how do you want to do that? They said, we're going to build a boot camp. I said, well, what's going to happen? And they said, we're not sure yet. Have you got any ideas? Oh boy, did I have an idea. And it's been 30 years, all over the world. Sure.
If you can remember, I'm sure you had many, but I'm just curious, a really interesting customer story.
Boy, there have been so many.
That's what I mean. So let's choose one.
But let me give an example.
Okay.
There was a time before COVID when I had many years in a row with more than 100 flights a year. That's how much traveling for keynote speaking and workshops and seminars. And COVID blessedly settled me down, right? So now I'm balancing a bit better. But I remember there was one time I was on a long haul flight and I needed sleep. So I went into the galley and I said, please don't wake me up for the meals. I'm just going to sleep. And if I wake up and I'm hungry, I'll come see you. They said, okay, Mr. Kaufman, have a nice sleep. And I went and I lay down, and when I woke up hours later, there was a sticker on my seat that basically was like this, and it said, you know, first meal, second meal, and there were no checks. So it was an instructional piece of communication to the crew. Don't wake this guy up and don't feed him. Okay, no problem with that, fine. And then I landed in an airport and changed airlines and went off on a different airline on another long-haul flight. It was going around the world. And I wanted more sleep. So I went into the galley and I said, please don't wake me up, etc. And I went to sleep. And when I woke up, there was this lovely card sitting on the table next to me. And it said, we hope you had a good sleep. While you were resting, we didn't want to awaken you, but should you awaken and be hungry, feel free to come to the galley. And I looked at that and I realized any crew walking by who saw that also knew not to wake me up. But the difference was that one airline was doing process and procedure and the other was doing passenger perception while at the same time communicating to the crew. Get the difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And both of these are outstanding award-winning airlines. That kind of subtle difference is what we're talking about here.
Makes the whole difference.
Okay? I did a lot of work in hospitals during COVID, and I saw, for example, these hand sanitizers. And they're all over the place, and there was a sign there that said, kill it. I never once saw anybody go and use it. Like, why would you? Why didn't it say use it? Or why didn't it say save lives? People would have been going over and pumping lives. Right? So then the way we're thinking about the perception of the person, the human being that's going to be the customer of this. How many times do we still see the word user?
A lot.
Nobody thinks of themselves as a user.
Very impersonal.
Where did that come from? I mean, we know it came from history, and you know, you had dumb terminals with users on the end long ago. But it's time to upgrade our thinking and our understanding and our interest in the whole experience of the person this is actually for.
Thank you for sharing beautiful stories. I learned a lot just listening to that. And I also had experience, you know, interacting with your family, also even with your wife. I remember when I was in quarantine and COVID, and I felt like, I mean, she just barely knew me, and it was so touching. The action that she actually took to make me feel comfortable and loved, you know, so that was very beautiful. But I'm just wondering, you know, here, do you have children?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, how many?
One.
Okay.
A daughter, she's now 27. She's in her final year of law school.
And I'm just wondering, given that you are doing what you're doing for so many years, so how does that translate, you feel, or have maybe been translating into your parenting style?
Difficult. Difficult, because with that number of days on the road, that number of weeks and months and accumulated years not there with her, then every moment that I could be with her, precious. And so I think both of us feel that. And there's just a level of adoration, I think, you know, on both sides. In our case, I mean, I'm a very literary character. I read a book a week, I write, I speak for a living, etc. So certainly you can imagine she grew up with a very sharp level of articulation. Right? And like many kids, especially only kids, especially I guess in this case, my wonderful kid, there's that need to, who are you going to fight with? Dad.
I can see that.
Oh my goodness. So did she develop skill? And now she's becoming a lawyer.
Speaking about children, which you could say for us represent the next generation of human beings on this planet. So now let's say if we look into the future, and I'm just curious, how do we combine like everything that we talked about today? So we talked about service and the culture and the mindset and different cultures, right? And being curious, and also leaders who having certain perspective and you know, view on how do you deal with people. Who is the person again who has been in this industry for so many years? When you look in the future, what do you see?
So the answer to that question that I'll share has to do with what my wife and I are doing right now. So I met my wife, I was scuba diving in Australia, and she was actually running the scuba diving shop. And the quality of customer service was just spectacular. So we're in the process right now of designing a home, where it's a 3-year design to be followed by a 2-year build. And we found a place in the area on the east coast of Singapore that's in a neighborhood where whatever happens on that particular corner, it's going to influence the neighborhood, just because of the way the road goes and the streets are, etc. And so we're literally building this house, not to put a wall around it, but there's actually a front part that's like a little neighborhood park. So you know that, you know, Sunday morning we can all meet for coffee, or Friday afternoon, come for beer. Right. See, and you don't even live in the neighborhood. Now imagine if you live in the neighborhood, right? And then inside the house, rather than having a house and a lawn, we're putting the house around a big central courtyard, big enough to have some very interesting gatherings in the year to come. Do you think they'll be diverse? Do you think they'll be multicultural? Do you think they'll be on a whole variety of different themes? And you know me, we're going to have presentation technology so people can come and talk about whatever. And you know my wife, she loves to cook, so we can have nice feasts that go on. Let's put the musicians up on the second floor. And you know, you've created something where as we age, there'll be less vigorous travel. But what if the vigor doesn't want to go away? How do you keep that vitality and have it be something that continues to contribute with other people, to other people, but therefore also to us? And so we're literally building a physical environment now. We call it the home reef because we're scuba divers. And you never know what's going to wash up on the reef from day to day or night to night. And so it's a pretty open space in our hearts and our minds, and eventually in Singapore, for people to come and visit.
Thank you so much for being so heartwarming today and generous with your sharing. I mean, if I can say on behalf of everyone, I'm sure that we all learned a lot, and I would encourage people to actually re-watch the interview again, because you just shared so many things that sometimes it's not registered, you know, from the first time when people hear that or see that. And Ron and I would love to hear from you guys when you let us know in the comments, what is your experience of service in Singapore? How are you, you know, if you are in the service industry, how would you like customers to be actually when they show up, right? So if you're a leader, then what have you noticed in your company and what would you like to change? You know, the conversations is where the change starts. And thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very grateful to Muse Studio for hosting YanaTV. And please remember, subscribe to the channel and share this video with the friend. Then we're going to go even deeper into the conversation. And I'm going to see you next time. And of course, I mean, they can go read your book and look up your website.
The book is called Uplifting Service. You can find it online.
Exactly.
It's the proven path to delighting your customers, colleagues, and everyone else you meet.
You could absolutely do that.